All right, what we're going to talk about really this afternoon is a macroeconomic look at where we are as a country and as a world, and then what it really means for you financially. A lot of this isn't really tied to trading. Some of it will be, and some of it will be tangentially related to trading. But what it's really about is what's going to be coming and what is really inevitable. And the bottom line on all this is what we've done in this country is we've created a political problem to which there is no political solution, which means that ultimately we will have to hit the wall. What you're seeing happen in Europe right now must happen here and will happen here, and it will have consequences. So I will warn you this up front. There's not going to be a whole lot of good news, okay? But I'll try to make it as cheery as I can. Starting off with just kind of a macro overview, the first point I would make is what you're seeing happen right now is very different than anything we've seen happen certainly in our lifetimes. There is a major change in the world economy. In 2008, the world was brought to the brink of ruin because two mid-sized investment banks went under. What's going to happen when Spain, Italy, and ultimately France get into trouble? One of the things that's interesting is everybody's been focused on Greece, and now there's starting to be some focus on Spain. It's become clear really for a year or more that Spain and Italy were ultimately going to become the real problems. Greece is small enough, we probably survived that, but because the French banks hold so much Spanish and Italian debt, and you start looking at things like the fact that the French banks are currently holding debt to GDP of about 250%. That is the equivalent if the U.S. banks were sitting on about $40 trillion of bad debt. Ultimately, these banks are going to fail. And let me also preface this with this statement. Everything that's happening in the world today is really designed to try to keep the banks from failing. The banks are all interrelated. They're all counterparties to each other's trades. They are all partners in each other's investments. And if you think about it from this perspective, in the world banking system, there are about $5 to $7 trillion in assets. Those banks have made somewhere between $100 and $120 trillion in loans to people who cannot possibly pay them back. Ultimately, they will fail. As the old saying goes, if you owe the bank $50,000 and you can't pay it, you have a problem. If you owe the bank $50 million and you can't pay it, the bank has a problem. Ultimately, unfortunately, the bank has a problem. Understand that going forward, it's not that, oh, everything's going to fall apart and just go down. Volatility is going to be the watchword. There will be times the markets will go up, times the markets go down. Again, I will explain as we go through here why that will be. There'll be periods of inflation and deflation. I will argue they will occur simultaneously. I'll explain what that means. The dollar will lose significant value. It already has. It will get worse. The idea that right now the dollar is doing well because the euro is going down more, it's a fantasy. We'll talk about that. There is opportunity, and this is, I guess, the ray of sunshine. If you think back to the 1930s, great fortunes were created because there was tremendous social upheaval. Whenever there is tremendous change, there is opportunity. The problem is the vast majority of people are going to get hit by a truck that they're never going to see coming. People are going to either ignore this, they're not going to hear about this, they're going to hope it doesn't happen. The problem is if these things happen, and I believe that there is no alternative but for these things to happen, and we can talk about this and we can argue about it, but the reality is if these things do come to pass, it will be life-changing for most people, and for most people that will not be a good thing. People fundamentally have to make a choice. They can be victors, they can be victims, because you can't sit this out. As I said earlier, for many years what I would counsel people is either understand how the markets work or stay out of the markets. Both are fair decisions. To be in the market and not understand how they work is a dopey decision. You're going to lose all of your money. The problem that you have now is that you can't sit out. Because of the macroeconomic factors we're going to discuss, it will affect everyone no matter what they do. Why? First of all, it's going to affect things like jobs. We are doing nothing in this country right now that's really going to improve the job situation. You want to fix the job situation? You got to reduce the cost of labor. How do you do that? Get rid of the corporate income tax. Corporations don't pay taxes anyway. The large corporations, especially GE last year made $5 billion in the United States, and they got money back from the government. Okay? It's a rigged game. The small and mid-sized businesses are the ones that get hurt, the ones that can create jobs. If you want to reduce the cost of employing someone, take the taxes out. That tax only brings in, last year it brought in $179 billion. With all the money we waste on other stuff, I mean, that's just a few green energy projects. The reality is that's the kind of thing that would make a difference. If you essentially did not allow the government to pick winners and losers. If you got rid of the minimum wage, you would create jobs. People, well, you hate poor people. No. Understand that the minimum wage was created basically to hold a group of people down. It was not created to help people. What you are effectively doing is you're pricing young people out of a market. People who don't, look, if you can set the minimum wage at $10 an hour, if someone can't provide $10 an hour worth of value, they're not going to get the job. If someone is 16 years old, they're in high school, or they're 18 years old, they've just gotten out of high school, they don't have a whole lot of skills. If I have to pay that person $10 an hour, or I have to pay somebody who's 30 years old with some work experience $10 an hour, who am I going to hire? How does that other person ever get their first job? How do they ever move up the ladder? But that is all political poison. You can't make these kinds of arguments and have anybody vote for you, because all that will be said is that you hate poor people. The problem is that we've made it so valuable to hold office in this country that nobody will say things that are unpopular, even though those things may be true. And that is going to become a theme that we go through here today. Social Security and Medicare are bankrupt. They're not going bankrupt. They are bankrupt. There isn't any money. If people believe that they're going to get the benefits they get today 10 years from now, I think they're delusional. I think 5 years from now is a stretch, but again, we will talk about that. We divide here really the small bucket and big bucket. This is the money people use to actively trade. The big bucket is the money that people are using really for wealth creation. This is the IRAs, the 401ks, the accounts, the money that people really forget about. All of these are going to be affected by what happens, as will real estate. What we have seen in real estate is not over. And probably the best analogy I can draw here today is this. I have heard rumors, I could be wrong about this, but I have heard rumors that in the Phoenix market, there are people who lost money in real estate over the last few years. Has anybody heard these stories? Maybe it's anecdotal. Okay. No, people got crushed. Why did they get crushed? Because they thought that real estate would always go up. You can buy stuff, it goes up, you sell it, you make money. It was a bubble. We had a stock market bubble. We had an internet bubble. We have dollar bubbles now. We have treasury bubbles. We're going to talk about this. But the key to a bubble is they always operate under the greater fool theory. The argument is it doesn't matter what you pay for something. As long as there's at least one person dumber than you who will pay more, it makes a lot of sense. This is what people did with real estate. And the problems they had with real estate are the problems they're going to have with all of their finances going forward. What defines a bubble? What we see here is we look at inflation-adjusted prices, we look at actual prices, nominal prices. What's fundamentally happened is prices went up in this country about 90%, housing prices up about 90%. During the same time, incomes only went up 2%. That is not sustainable. This is the anomaly. There are people saying, well, we just have to wait for housing prices to come back up. Now, because we may face some very serious inflation, you may see housing prices go up. But in terms of actual real dollar terms, they're not going to go back up to where they were. Any more than tulip bulbs. I mean, you know, the stories are that tulip bulbs in the 1600s in Holland were selling for the equivalent of $200,000 today. That was a bubble because people were willing to pay more. They always thought tulip bulbs would go up. People literally were paying 10 years of income to buy tulip bulbs. Tulip bulbs never went back to $200,000, okay? Housing, again, in dollar terms, in real terms, are not going to go back to where they were. People bought houses up here, just like they buy stock with absolutely no protection whatsoever. You can insure real estate, and the way that you do it are with puts on the Case-Shiller Housing Index. You can buy puts on the U.S. housing market. That way, when market prices go down, the value of your puts go up, and these have been around since 2005. People could have protected every dollar that they had in real estate, and the vast majority of people had no idea this existed. And this is the analogy I want to draw. People are playing a game that they don't understand. What is going to happen to them financially? They know something's wrong, but they don't fully understand it. There are solutions. There were solutions to protecting yourself in housing, but people didn't take advantage of them. And as I mentioned earlier, everybody has fire insurance. Almost nobody has insurance. Let me ask you, how many people knew that these existed? Okay. I have, in probably 5 years of talking about this, I've had one person who actually did this. And that person made a lot of money doing this. The reality is there are tools out there, but you've got to know what you're doing. And unfortunately, the average person at this point just doesn't understand what's coming, and that's what I want to try to explain here today. The idea is don't just try to get by. There's going to be a tremendous amount of opportunity to create wealth. Make sure that you don't just survive, but you thrive during these times. What are the skills I think people are going to need? I think people are going to have to understand options for two reasons. One is to be able to protect things they own, whether it's their houses, whether it's their portfolios, gold, oil, whatever it may be. You can buy options on everything. The other thing is that you generally cannot go short in an individual retirement account. You can buy puts in an IRA. That allows you to make money when markets decline. You will always make more money faster when markets go down than when markets go up. It is a critical skill if you want to build wealth over time. Again, for your trading bucket as well as your wealth bucket, this protection, I got to tell you, if you wanted to stop the banking crisis that was tied to real estate, why banks made you have homeowners insurance and not have puts as well on the housing market, I don't understand. Or even if they had bought them. They could have hedged all of those portfolios, but they did not. The big picture, most of what I'm going to cover here this afternoon is really where are we going, how do you know where you are, when do you want to own assets and when do you want to be short, and what is it that you should own in short. There are going to be times you're going to want to be on both sides of this. This will not be a unidirectional market. Intermarket analysis. If you want to know where the market's going on any given day, look at the dollar. If you look at the dollar overnight and the dollar's up, the market is normally down. If you look at the market and the dollar is down, the market is usually up the next day. It was certainly true going into today. High liquidity leverage trading. We talked a little bit about this earlier. Make your money work harder for you, whether it's futures, Forex, or options. In this world, you either work for your money or your money works for you. The whole idea here is to make it work harder. All right. One of the problems many of us have is we came to age as investors when the market did this. You can buy and hold in that market. You can buy on the dips. You can dollar cost average. Drunk monkeys throwing darts made money in that market. The E-Trade baby was making money in that market. The reality is over the last 10 years, this has been the market. Most people look at their account statements, and quite frankly, even their account statements don't show they're even because they get in and out at the wrong times. This market, actually, you can make more money than in this market because you have these downswings where you can make a lot of money very quickly. But if you don't understand how to use puts and go short, you're missing opportunity. When it comes down to actual value of the money, though, most people have lost significant value. We'll talk about that in a little bit. People bought, just like they bought real estate, here and did nothing to protect themselves. Again, we mentioned this a little bit earlier today. There are people who come here driving $25,000 cars with $250 deductibles and all the insurance in the world. They have $1 million stock portfolios and they have no insurance whatsoever. I don't understand how that makes sense at all. If you're going to own assets, you have to pay for the insurance and the protection, or you're just taking entirely too much risk. And that becomes really gambling. That is not investing.